Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to today's video. This episode will guide you through the issues of In May of 1975, Giant Size X-Men #1 came out. Deadly Genesis, Chapter 1. The location is Winseldorf in Germany, a tiny, gentle and peaceful village in the Bavarian Alps. Hardly anything ever happens here to disturb the domestic tranquility. Until now. A lynch mob has formed in pursuit of a monster. At least, that's what they call him. However, in this case, it is they who are the monsters instead. Filled with prejudice and hatred for a being they do not understand. Kurt Wagner, the man they are chasing, would probably have been safer if he stayed with the carnival. But he does not want to spend his life as the carnival's freak anymore. He is done with it. And he would rather die as a man than hide away from civilization, even if it means they will kill him. He jumps onto the wall of a house and clings to it, scaling it until he is on top of the roof. Features like these, and his looks, strengthen the case of him being anything but human. The people chasing him are telling for the monster to come down, or they will burn him down, convinced that they've got him trapped now. He yells back at them, and it sounds like a beast howling. Yelling that he has done nothing wrong. All it does is tempt the crowd to throw their burning torches at him, setting a part of the village ablaze. Kurt jumps down in the middle of the crowd. He's done with these people. All he wanted was to learn, but all he has learned from these people is blind and unreasonable violence. He will show these men that if that's all they have to offer, he has a thing or two to teach them as well. He howls as he tries to fight his way through the men. But there are just too many. They got him. One of the men calls out to bring in the stake, and so it is that they are about to plunge the stake right through his heart, and by doing so, rid themselves of this monster. But suddenly they hear a voice in their minds, telling them to stop, and everybody freezes, to Kurt's surprise. The man responsible for this introduces himself to Kurt as Charles Xavier. Kurt asks him why he's done this. Charles tells him that he heard Kurt say that he wanted to learn and he himself is a teacher. He tells him he runs a school for gifted youngsters, such as Kurt himself. A school for mutants. Kurt has heard of the word mutant and Xavier tells him he is one. He tells him he can help him, find his true potential. Kurt asks him if Xavier can help him be normal, and Xavier in return asks Kurt if he truly wants to be normal, after having experienced tonight's misfortunes. Kurt says he probably doesn't, but he does want to be a whole Kurt Wagner. And he tells Xavier that if Xavier can make him that, he will go with him and have him as a teacher. Next, Professor Xavier travels to Quebec, Canada, to a secluded military installation to meet up with a very special agent, codenamed Weapon X, otherwise known as Wolverine. When Wolverine arrives, Xavier introduces himself, but Wolverine is not impressed much, until he gets told Xavier is here to make him a deal. Charles tells him he knows of his recent battle with the Incredible Hulk, and also knows of his powers. He tells him he's a mutant, and that he has need of mutants. Desperate need. Wolverine asks him what about his position with the Canadian government, and Charles tells him he's offering a chance to become a free agent, and, moreover, a chance to learn to put his powers to the greatest use. Wolverine is intrigued and tells Xavier he has found his man, but his higher in command tells him he won't let him go that easily. The Canadian government has invested a great deal of time and money into turning Wolverine into what he is now, and if he tries to walk out on them, he will have him locked up. Wolverine extends one of his claws and points it at him, telling him it's still a free country, and that he's resigning his commission, effective immediately, as he cuts the man's thigh in two and then points at him with his finger and claw, asking him if he has any further objections in a threatening manner. The man can only respond by telling Wolverine that he will not have heard the last of this. Wolverine walks out with the professor, telling his former boss he knows where to find him. After that, the professor recruits an old friend in the form of Sean Cassidy, who is attending the Grand Ole Opry. Xavier has known the Banshee for a while and tells him what he needs his help for, and he will gladly help the professor out. Next up, Kenya in Africa, where a ceremony is taking place on a small hill. Men are walking up to a great stone portal in humility, and their voices are raised in praise and song, and prayerful supplication, begging the storm goddess Aurora to ease their burden. And then, accompanied by thunder and wind, she comes, asking what her children wish from her, and they tell her that the land is plagued by drought, and their crops and grasses are withered and parched. They offer to slay animals in her honor, only for her to bring them rain, but the storm goddess tells them there will be no need for that, as they need their sustenance more than she does. She will perform what they plead for. She summons her powers and her eyes grow dark, same as the sky above her. The winds come up and sweep her away from the hill, basking in the raw power of the elements, hers to control. She's truly happy here, and she makes the sky rain when she returns. She sees her happiness is shared by the men who begged her for this rainfall. She then hears a voice in her head. He compliments her on her impressive and beautiful display of her powers, but all she wants to know is who he is and what he's doing here in her land. He tells her his name is Xavier and that he has come to make her an offer. He hopes she will not refuse. She asks him what he could possibly offer a goddess. He tells her that where she now has a land of people that adore her, he offers her a world. A world filled with people that may fear or even hate her, but a people that need her nonetheless. He tells her that the world he offers is not beautiful, but it is for real. Far more real than the fantasy she's living here now. He tells Aurora she's not a goddess at all, but a mutant, and that she has responsibilities. He asks her to come with him and taste the world outside, a world she may come to find either bitter or sweet. Aurora looks at him and tells him he presents a peculiar argument, but she does sense a deep sincerity in his words, and she decides to come along with him, figuring that perhaps the time has come to leave the nest at last. Xavier then makes a trip to Osaka in Japan to meet up with an old acquaintance named Shiro Yoshida. Even though Shiro has no love for the Western world and tells Xavier he owes him nothing, he does realize that Xavier would not have come to him had he not needed his help. Shiro sees this as an opportunity to let the world once more hear from him as Sunfire, and he agrees to come along with Xavier. On the lands of a collective farm in Siberia, the people are satisfied. It has been a good year with a large agricultural output. One of the workers in the fields is being warned by another one of his colleagues. Pyotr Rasputin's sister is in danger. One of the tractors is making his way to his little sister. Peter runs towards her as fast as he can, without hesitation, and the adrenaline running through his body is having an astonishing effect. The air starts to crackle with energy around him, and his skin changes into a metal-like armor. He manages to put himself between his sister and the tractor and picks her up, but he can't get himself out of harm's way in time. He braces himself for impact as the tractor smashes into him, breaking down in bits and pieces. He wonders if his poor neighbors will be able to afford a new one, but that will have to be a worry for another day, because the remainder of this day will be filled with other problems. Suddenly he hears Xavier's voice in his head and he asks who it is. Xavier explains and asks him to come to America with him, because his powers are needed not just for the good of the Russian state, but for the good of the whole world. And Pyotr tells Xavier to come talk to his parents about him. He asks his father for advice, because he is happier as a farmer, but also acknowledges the wisdom in Xavier's words concerning teaching him to learn to deal with his mutant powers. His father tells him to follow his heart, and Pyotr says that his heart tells him to stay, but his conscience tells him otherwise. He says he must go and join Xavier, and his father agrees. Xavier and Pyotr leave, and Pyotr's parents tell him that they love him, and he tells them not to worry and that he will right them, that he will make them proud, and they tell him that they already are proud of him. Next we switch to Camp Verde, Arizona, to the reservation where John Proudstar has lived his whole life, but he doesn't like it there. He does not like to see the old members of his tribe slumped against his doorsteps, dreaming dreams of glory which is long gone. John is an Apache, and he is ashamed of the state his tribe is in. The Apache were meant to be hunters, warriors, not the sad-eyed, simpering people they have become. They were meant to run free, with the wind blowing wildly through their hair. Nothing could stand before the Apache in earlier days, not even the Bisons. Bisons used to fall before the Apache skill and Apache bravery, but never like this particular Bison. Never in the way that John Proudstar is able to subdue it. He starts hearing Xavier's voice in his mind as well, who tells him he's been looking for a man just like John. Surprised by this, he turns around and sees Xavier sitting there in his wheelchair, asking him how a cripple managed to get here. He tells Xavier that he got 5 seconds to get out of here. He doesn't want company, and certainly not the company of a white man. Xavier tells him not to get nasty with him, because he's here to help John with fulfilling his dream of giving his people their pride back. He tells John that he's special, that he's a mutant and that he's needed. John tells him Xavier can stuff a cactus. He doesn't care if the white man needs his help. All they've done is give his people grief, and he tells Xavier to leave. Xavier then asks if he's really turning his back on him, after he offered him a chance to help the world and pours it on more by saying that then maybe what's being said of the Apache is true, that they are all frightened, selfish children. This triggers John in telling Xavier that he's not a coward, and just as good as the next guy, better even, and he will prove it to Xavier, who tells him he will have his chance. He promises him that, as he thinks to himself whether John or any of this new X-Men are even up for the task at hand, or if they will carry the world down in ruin instead. Chapter 2. When all the new X-Men are assembled in Westchester, New York, communication is a mess. With all these people from different countries, there's an enormous language barrier between them all. Xavier settles this by giving them all a telepathic crash course in the English language, solving whatever problems they had with communicating with one another at first. They all have their own costume now, where only Sunfire, Banshee and Wolverine had one before. Piotr and Aurora are amazed at the costumes, which are made of unstable molecules, meaning they will adjust themselves where necessary. It's a technology Xavier obtained from a man called Reed Richards, someone who they are bound to meet at a later time, and his friends as well. Xavier wants to tell them there are more urgent matters at hand first, but gets interrupted by Shiro, who is getting impatient, and wants to know why they are all here. Xavier tells Shiro that it was not his intent to waste their time, but he was waiting on the arrival of someone who can explain the situation far better than he could. That's when they all get introduced to the man called Cyclops. Cyclops fills them in on the depressingly simple details. The original X-Men team has disappeared, and the new recruits are the only hope of getting them back. He asks them all to follow him so he can show them how and where it all began. He takes them to the device called Cerebro, which is their mutant detector. The same device with which Xavier found them all, and the same device through which Cyclops lost his closest friends. They were all in the mansion when the Cerebro started sounding an alarm louder than ever before. The Professor, joined by Angel, Iceman, Marvel Girl, Polaris, Havoc and Cyclops, all responded to it. Cerebro had detected a new mutant on the island of Krakoa in the South Pacific. A mutant so powerful it defied all classification. So Xavier sent Scott and the other X-Men out to quickly find the new mutant before anyone else could. They embarked on a mission using their specially designed stratojet, heading headlong into an unknown confrontation. Aboard the plane, Marvel Girl says she wished they would have contacted the Beast. But Cyclops tells her that he graduated the X-Men, and if he doesn't have time for them anymore, that's his choice and his business. And that right now they have to worry about their own business. It was time to get serious, because they had arrived at the island of Krakoa. When they land on Krakoan soil, Iceman is still making jokes, even though Cyclops already told them while still on the jet to start getting serious. Cyclops says they have a difficult job ahead of them, and he wants everyone to focus on that. Angel adds that it might not just be a difficult job, but even an impossible one, since they have no idea what they're looking for. As they get ready to fan out and scout the area around them, they are getting attacked from behind, and Cyclops didn't even get to see what hit them. When he wakes up, he's back on the jet without knowing it, dealing with a massive headache and no idea where his friends and teammates are, or what happened to them. All he does is realize that he's not wearing his visor anymore, only to find out that his eyes have turned normal, or powerless. No more uncontrollable beams of concussive force blasting from them. He tries to fire his race, but he just can't seem to. He looks around and finds himself on the jet, unable to control it, as the autopilot has been turned on and jammed. So he can't return to the island anymore. He tries for several minutes to gain control over the aircraft and finally just gives in to the situation he's in. After a while, the jet is returned to Westchester, and Cyclops arrives home, yelling out for the professor to tell him he's home. Both not happy at all with what happened to the other team members. Actually, not even knowing what happened to them at all. Scott tells the professor all he knows, which is that something on the island cured his eyes and put him back on the plane. But before he can finish his sentence, he asks the professor why he's looking at him the way he is. He tells Scott that his eyes are starting to glow, and that he should quickly get his protective lenses. All Scott can do is try and block his eyes, and hate the fact that the powers which have cursed him from his early teens are now back. Not only that, but they seem to have grown stronger than ever before. Xavier then modified one of his old visors, and left Scott behind to allow him to retrain himself in gaining control over his boosted eye blasts, while he himself went on trips around the globe to recruit the new X-Men. Wolverine asks now what, and Scott tells him that now they will go back to Krakoa to try and find the original X-Men, and the new, unknown mutant that defeated them. Sunfire tells Cyclops that he will not be taking part in this fool's errand. Scott is surprised and tells he doesn't understand why he's backing out from a chance to help their fellow mutants, and Shiro tells him he doesn't even like his fellow mutants, let alone will he risk his life to help them. Scott says he doesn't have any time to waste in arguing and leaves Shiro behind in the mansion, as he and the other X-Men board the Stratojet and leave for Krakoa. The tension is palpable, and Aurora says that she just tasted her first dose of mutant camaraderie, and she doesn't like it one bit. To which John reacts that this group she's in isn't exactly a mutual admiration society. He says they're all in this situation for their own reasons, and patting each other on the back isn't part of anyone's motivation. And then he tells Cyclops that he notices something following them, who turns out to be Sunfire. He asks if they will open the hatch, or if he will have to fly to Krakoa himself. Kurt asks him what made him change his mind, and if he was afraid to go back home alone. But Sunfire tells him his reasons are nobody's business but his own. Chapter 3. When they finally arrive at Krakoa, Cyclops tells Wolverine and John that he's not a fan of their sense of humor, as he calls John Thunderbird. John tells him that his name is Proudstar, but Cyclops tells him Xavier has given them all codenames and they better get used to using them from now on. He tells Colossus and Storm that they will be coming in from the north of the island. Wolverine and Banshee will be making their way across the island from east to west. Sunfire and Nightcrawler will start their search from the south, and Thunderbird and Cyclops himself will be proceeding from the west of the island. The south team gets dropped off first, and he tells them to get ready, but Sunfire doesn't like being teamed up with Nightcrawler, nor does he like Cyclops' tone. Then the east team gets dropped off next, after which it's the north team's turn. Cyclops is preparing the jet's descent, and Thunderbird mentions how it seems that everyone is arguing with one another. Returning to Krakoa makes Cyclops shudder, even though he tries to suppress it. He wonders how many of them they will lose on this island this time around, and if he himself will even be around to find out. But Cyclops is a trained professional, and leaves his fears inside the jet as they put their feet on the island's ground. He tells Thunderbird they should probably get started on their exploration of the island, as Thunderbird tells him that he hopes Cyclops isn't leading them straight into another massacre. Cyclops turns around to get back to the plane to get the Mini Cerebro unit he left on board, but when he does, they find out the jet has disappeared entirely. As confused as they both are, Thunderbird figures the island can't just have opened itself up and swallowed the entire jet. And Cyclops agrees, but neither should a strange temple suddenly appear. Yet one has. He points at the temple that wasn't there when they landed, and he tells Thunderbird that it's probably as good a spot as any to start a search, so they make their way towards it. As they make their way through the jungle, Thunderbird and Cyclops suddenly get grabbed by a vine that appears to be alive. Something they won't be for long themselves if they don't do something fast. Thunderbird just pulls the tree out of the soil by the root, and Cyclops starts zapping away at the vines. Thunderbird asks Cyclops if he has any suggestions, but Cyclops tells him he seems to be doing just fine on his own. Within moments they have made their way through the jungle, leaving a trail of damage behind them as they arrive at the temple safely, and Cyclops wonders how the other teams are doing. The east team of Banshee and Wolverine are making their way as well, but get attacked by a giant organism, resembling a crab. If either one of them gets caught in one of its claws, it might turn out to be fatal. Luckily, Wolverine has some claws of his own, which he has no issue with in using them for what they are intended to be used for. He comments to the Irish Banshee while he's slashing away, asking him if he's going to just stand around and gawk or actually help him. Unbeknownst to Wolverine, Banshee is already using his sonic powers to fly, and then starts to attack the creature from the air, and he's pretty much as effective in his attack as Wolverine is. After a short but violent battle, they keep on making their way to the temple they spotted during their earlier exploration of the island. Soon enough, they run into Storm and Colossus, who they are happy to see, and so are they. Only minutes earlier, Storm had seen the temple as well, and she had told Colossus that they should start the search right there. Colossus mentions how Storm is so different than any girl he has met in his home country of Russia, as they are almost getting covered in rocks which are falling from high up. Storm sees the rocks falling down in time and Colossus armors up, as they try and outrun the avalanche, but Colossus notices that the rocks cannot be outrun at all. They are actually changing direction and are following them. Since he can no longer be hurt by the rocks in his organic metal form, he grabs a tree and defends Storm, who says there's no real need to protect her, because she has created a strong enough wind to carry the rocks right into the ocean, far away from the island. Shortly after they've met up with Banshee and Wolverine, Cyclops and Thunderbird join them as well. Now they will just have to wait for the final team to arrive. On the south side of the island, Nightcrawler and Sunfire are being attacked by birds, who seem to be keeping them away from the temple they are making their way to, or are trying to. Sunfire keeps calling Nightcrawler a misfit, and Nightcrawler makes a remark about how Sunfire's behavior is starting to make him believe that the mutant community is no more hospitable than the humans are. One of the birds tries to rake Nightcrawler with his talons, but he teleports out in time. Sunfire says that he has no need for parlor tricks such as his, and attacks the birds directly and deals with them until there are no more birds left. As they make their way towards the temple, Sunfire keeps up his nasty attitude towards Nightcrawler, and soon enough they join the other teams at the temple's entrance. They make their way in, and Cyclops tells the other members that he suspects the reason for the temple being here is to lure them in. They run into a sealed door and he tells Sunfire, Storm and Colossus to start using their combined powers on the door to break it down, and they are successful in doing so. As they proceed into the darkness behind the door, they are shocked by what they find. They have stumbled upon the other X-Men who had been left behind during Cyclops' first ordeal here on the island, and something seems to be feeding on them as there are some kind of tubes going into each and every one of their bodies. Cyclops tells everyone to stop staring at them and set them free. Wolverine and Banshee are trying to get Iceman loose, but as soon as they pull the tubes away from his body, the temple starts to shake, tearing itself apart. Cyclops, who himself is carrying Marvel Girl, tells everyone to quickly carry whoever is closest to them and get out of there, before the building collapses. They make it outside before that actually does happen, and slowly the original X-Men are starting to come to, and Angel asks Cyclops why he came back for them. Cyclops doesn't understand the question, and Angel tells him he's a fool and asks him why he doesn't understand. He tells Cyclops it wanted it to come back and bring others with him. It was all a trap and now it's too late. To mostly everyone's amazement, the ground around the collapsed temple starts to tear up, and Angel tells them that of course it does. They all came to this island to look for a mutant, but the mutant they were looking for is the island itself. Chapter 4. The X-Men's minds get overrun by images. Images of an explosion from an atomic test. An explosion with unseen radiation which permeated every living organism on the island, until they grew linked and formed an intelligence, which gave the island a life of its own. Eventually Krakoa grew hungry, and that hunger got appeased only just when the original X-Men arrived on the island. Krakoa fed upon their mutant energies but still grew hungrier, which is why it released one X-Men and sent it out to find more food, and Cyclops did just that. Cyclops now realizes he had been used all along, and Krakoa says it not only used Cyclops, but Xavier as well, in a voice that only Xavier's mind could hear. Krakoa tells them that the time for explanation is now over, and that it's now time to feed, as he attacks them all. Cyclops tells him to scatter, but Wolverine has a better idea. He is out for Krakoa's blood. Banshee, Sunfire and Storm join Wolverine in the attack, but it seems of little use. Storm says that they have to keep trying though, so all of the X-Men, each and every one of them, attack Krakoa by unleashing their powers. resulting in a savage battle. The conflict goes on until suddenly Xavier contacts Cyclops telepathically and tells him to stop. Their approach is not the right one. He has been monitoring their attacks and he thinks he's found the right way to deal with Krakoa. He thinks he has found Krakoa's weak spot and fills him in on it. From halfway across the world, Xavier braces himself for the coming ordeal. He concentrates as he joins his X-Men in attacking Krakoa, but in a manner that none of them could. He fights Krakoa on a mental level, where the others attack the island physically. At Cyclops' command, Storm rises high above Krakoa, summoning a tempest full electronic fury and transmitting those energies towards Polaris, who uses her own magnetic powers to complete the circuit. Polaris screams out. Her physical limits are reached and even exceeded, but she tells Storm to not stop what she's doing, whatever it is. Her boyfriend Havoc tells his brother Cyclops to call it off. He can't bear seeing his girlfriend take this kind of punishment. He thinks it will kill her. He tells his brother that he can't sacrifice the world to save one woman, even if it's the woman that he loves. Havoc swears that he will do something to Cyclops if she ends up dying, but no one can hear what he said he will do to Cyclops because his voice is being cancelled out by the crackling roar of thunderous downpour that accompanies Storm's release of the full scope of her elemental powers. However, Banshee observes that Krakoa is only getting stronger from the water that is pouring down on him. Xavier did not expect this to happen, and Krakoa's mind suddenly grows a lot more forceful. He can't keep on assaulting Krakoa from afar as he has been and has to call it quits. He tells Cyclops that he's sorry, but they are on their own now. He cannot continue with this anymore. Replenished by the rain, Krakoa has now gained the strength to destroy them all. But the X-Men won't stop. They can't stop. They have to try and put a stop to Krakoa. Marvel Girl tells Cyclops that they can't hold Krakoa off forever. And Cyclops tells her they will find out soon enough, and tells her to get everybody back as they're going to give it their all, once again. Scott turns around and can't see Polaris anymore. She has been totally submerged in a flashing, extremely bright pillar of magnetic force, and he tells his brother to start using his powers, right now, as he himself does the same. Polaris' magnetic powers erupt downward, all the way through the ocean, through the Earth's crust, and finally down to the very molten core of the planet itself, with near undescribable force, having an immediate and violent effect on Krakoa, who has not experienced anything like this ever before. The living island's mind starts to hurt, and it cannot retain its humanoid form anymore, asking for help. Xavier's plan seems to have worked. Cyclops tells everyone to leave now, since they only have several seconds to clear out. Havoc says that Polaris is too weak, after having given her all during this battle, and he intends to carry her, but Iceman is already on it, telling Havoc she doesn't need his help at all, and that she's in good hands for a change. Havoc grows angry with this comment, and Cyclops tells him to argue later. There's no time for this now. Everyone rushes away from the scene, and Thunderbird points out that the whole island seems to be breaking up around them. Angel is afraid that they won't be able to get away from the island fast enough, with their jet having been swallowed by the island. But Iceman has a solution. He creates a plateau made of solid ice which can be used as a raft, and the brothers Cyclops and Havoc use their powers in conjunction to quickly propel the raft away from the island. When they look back at the island, they see the results from Polaris' electromagnetic energy bolt, as Krakoa starts to move violently. She severed Krakoa's connection to the Earth's magnetic and gravitational fields, and that, coupled with the forces of the Earth coming together, results in Krakoa getting ejected into space. Krakoa screams death cries which ring for a couple of long seconds in the minds of the X-Men, until they get shocked back to reality. It is not over yet, as the space that Krakoa left behind starts to get filled up by the rest of the ocean, rushing in such a manner that a whirlpool starts to form, pulling the raft in. Cyclops tells Iceman to create a dome of ice over the raft, which is their only chance of surviving the maelstrom. The bubble of ice gets sucked in, with all the X-Men getting battered against the walls of Iceman's construction. Screams of pain can be heard until they are gone underwater. Minutes pass until suddenly the bubble bursts out from underneath the surface of the ocean, after which the bubble itself gets burst by Cyclops' I-beam. The X-Men are now in safer waters, with fresh air around them and a warm sun shining on them. They also find the stratojet in the water close by. Angel flies towards it to open a hatch, so they can all paddle towards it and climb on board. A little bit later, when all the X-Men are inside, they soon find out that there aren't seats for everyone in the aircraft. The plane was not designed to carry this many mutants, which in turn brings them to the next little problem. Namely, what are they going to do with 13 X-Men? Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. You can help growing this channel by hitting the like button and by subscribing if you haven't already subscribed. This tells YouTube that the videos I'm making should be recommended to others and would be very much appreciated. See you next episode.